Good afternoon, everybody. Um, so, newsflash: President Trump dismissed a scientific study without having read and understood it. Also, water is wet, fire is hot, and we're going to look at the study ourselves. Okay, so we're just going to pull the relevant clip from the Philip DeFranco show where I first saw it because it's easy that way.
Of people pointing to a report from a study of hundreds of veteran affairs patients across the country. That study claiming to find higher rates of death in patients taking hydroxychloroquine as opposed to those who were not. But that said, to be clear here, this study has also not been peer-reviewed yet and published in a medical journal. But one of the reasons we've seen people pointing to this is not only what it shows, but who funded it, because it was the National Institutes of Health. Now, that said, yesterday while speaking to reporters, we saw Trump reference and dismiss that VA study.
And if you look at that phony report that was put in, that report on the hydroxy was given to people that were in extraordinarily bad condition. Extraordinarily bad. People that were dying.
Though, here, we haven't really seen any evidence to back that claim up. In this interview, Trump also described the researchers as not big Trump fans. But focusing on that study, researchers did say they adjusted for comorbidities, right? The presence of two chronic diseases or conditions in a patient. And that's because patients averaged around 70 years old, and many of them had other pre-existing conditions. But that doesn't necessarily mean they were necessarily in extraordinarily bad condition during the study. And also here, I do want to note that while there are two separate studies from France and China indicating that...
Okay, well, that's all we need to hear from Philip on this. We heard what the president said. Here is the actual study. By the way, link in the description box to the actual study. Follow along with me if you want. And here on the bottom of page 2, you'll see the most important results. Basically, for the people who got hydroxychloroquine, 27.8% of them died. People who got hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin, 22% of them died. And people who got no hydroxychloroquine whatsoever, 11.4% of them died. So basically, if you got hydroxychloroquine, you are basically twice as likely to have died, right? So they looked at a whole bunch of these comorbidities, right? And they're down here. Right? Trump went ahead and said that these are really, really sick people, like totally sick, right? And so the median age for these people that were in the study was 70 for the people who got hydrochloroquine, 68 who got hydrochloroquine and azithromycin, and 69 for those who got none. So, yeah, these are kind of old patients. I'll give you that. But you know how old President Trump is? Right now, he's 73 years old. 73. So he is 3 years older than the median age of the hydrochloroquine group right here, right? The oldest of them. Now, what does stand out to me in this is that over 2/3 of the participants in the study were African American, and I don't know if that has to do with people who are not of a minority. Even if they're veterans, they might also have other healthcare options, other health insurance that they're using, and maybe the VA is used more by minorities. I'm not sure about that, but This does kind of go along with other studies that we've seen come out of like Detroit that says, you know, uh, the African American population there was hit hard, uh, not proportionally, like disproportionately hard by the disease. But that has nothing to do with Trump saying that they're, weaker physically. But all of these different things were taken into account: pulse ox readings, breaths per minute, heart rate, all this temperature, all this stuff, right? But then it gets down to the nitty gritty, uh, after all the platelet counts and all that, where they're talking about like, were they smokers? It didn't seem to matter much. Uh, did they have asthma? Did they have all these other things? Now, what they did have a lot of was diabetes without complications, and that might be one thing to look at. But you know what? Um, how would we know if our president had diabetes without complications? Because he has a staff doctor saying that he has a perfect bill of health when he's obviously in a very high BMI category, right? So right here is another way of looking at it. But I'm going to go up to page, I think it's 16. Yeah, 16. This is something that stood out to me as being uh, kind of a slam dunk as far as disproving what Trump was saying, because these patients were categorized as those patients who got ventilation and those who didn't, but also um, those who got hydrochloroquine with azithromycin, and no hydrochloroquine, right? So prior to ventilation, right, 90 out of 97 of the hydrochloroquine patients got their dose. So you can't make the claim that the doctors waited until it was medically necessary to start administering drugs, and therefore there's some sort of bias, when most of the clients that got the hydrochloroquine, 90 out of 97 of them got it before they were ventilated. Those who got hydrochloroquine plus azithromycin, 101 of them got it before they were ventilated later on in their treatment. And then another 12 of them were added onto that. So the numbers add up. I mean, this is 19 more than this category, and these people right here ended up 12 of them ended up over here, and 7 of them ended up over here. The totals add up, you know, simple math, but it really does show that these people who got the medication at the time that they got it were not, for the most part, those who were acutely sick and already on ventilators. These are the patients that were given it because they came in with severe symptoms, but they weren't all the way to the ventilator stage yet, for the most part, right? So you can't say that there's some sort of bias that they were, you know, um, that they were waiting until it was really, really, really bad. This was given kind of prophylactically for the most part. Um, so that's another way to read this study and say, yeah, like, yeah, Trump is wrong. Not only did they give it prophylactically and not at the last minute in most cases, when you look at all of the different comorbidities that this study took into consideration, and then at the end, they go ahead and do some really, really interesting math right here. where they take all of the adjusted hazard ratio from all of those comorbidities, do the math, and they can still come up with the result that basically using hydrochloroquine increases your risk of death. So, um, yeah, Trump's wrong about this. It really does take into consideration all the different health problems that these veterans had. Plus, these are people who served their country, didn't dodge the draft like Trump did. And so we know that they at least did a prerequisite amount of push ups in order to earn the title veteran at some point in their lives. They actually understand how to keep up their health, and they have been given a pretty good example, given that a few of the years of their lives, at least, were filled with physical training. So these are pretty healthy for who they are, veterans. Um, yeah, they're in their late 60s and 70s for the most part, but that's an age group that is just a little bit younger than Trump. So, um, yeah, link in the description box if you want to read the study. Um, let's see. In my comments section, let's see who we got here. TP Seeker. I like that name. Toilet Paper Seeker says, till we see the prescription, I won't believe Trumpsky is taking hydrochloroquine. He's just shilling for the company for some reason. It is kind of strange because he does use future tense and past tense in that press release, that press time that he was having. Also, he never wears a mask. Why would he do the prophylactic of taking a drug if he's never going to wear a mask in public, like all the other responsible officials? You know, Hillary Pugh says, "I have lupus and I had to get off that drug. It's not a joke. If you don't have constant blood work and monitoring, it can be very bad." Um, I have family members that are prescribed that drug too, and I really don't want them to have to go without because there's a run on a drug that doesn't even work uh, as far as a prophylactic for the virus. And so, worse than toilet paper, you can't even wipe your ass with it. Um, but some people need it, and yeah, it'd be horrible for them to be going without because there's a artificial shortage created by our idiot president. Nick wants to say most test subjects were black. That group, due to their blood antigens, are more susceptible to COVID viruses as a whole. Uh, Citations, please, Nick. I do know that when I looked at the comorbidities, that the fact that a huge number of them had diabetes does seem to correlate with a large representation from the African American community. That does seem to pass mustard, but also people with diabetes have an increased risk with this coronavirus. So there's that. But um, you can't tell me that President Trump isn't at least pre-diabetic. Um, I'm not his doctor. I'm just looking at him and I'm like, eh, not the figure of good health that I would want. Uh, let's see. Hillary says, I don't think he's actually taking it. A doc would not do that willy nilly. If you don't have an autoimmune condition, the monitoring gets very complicated. Um, while I do think that maybe he's lying about taking it, I don't think that it would be impossible for him to get it. You got the money, you can get things like that. You want a doctor shop, you can find doctors that will sell you whatever you want. Good evening, Bugsy. Hillary says, especially with his existing heart disease and obesity. Yeah, that makes it a little bit more suspect, because who wants to be the person to be known for prescribing the drug that kills Trump? Maybe there are some people, but like, yeah, I get what you're saying. Uh, TP Seeker says, how many of our vets in the VA died due to being given hydrochloroquine without their or family's knowledge for testing? Uh, I don't know that it was a test, right? And since for the hydrochloroquine only group, it was 90 out of 97 that were given before they were put on a ventilator. To me, that says that 90 of those 97 knew what was going on. And then 7, it happened after they were on a ventilator, which requires that you be put in a medically induced coma. So those 7, we can say that they didn't know, but they didn't do it, or they weren't given it for the study's purposes. The study just took a sample of all of the VA medical centers' treatments of all of their patients throughout like every city. So um, no, it wasn't a matter of them being given it uh, for the study's purpose. But yeah, you know, those who are already in a medical coma can't really make these decisions for themselves. It's up to the doctor. And I would hope that the doctor is just looking out for the best interest of the patient at hand, and not for whether or not we need uh, people in a study. Um, Nick Bravo wants to know who funded the test. Uh, that was actually in DeFranco's video. It was the National Institute of Health. Um, here's let me just give you this right here. That's first page of the study, by the way. Um, you know, here's Joseph. I want to say Magagnoli et al. Right, and then here's all the people that they represent. Right here, a couple universities and all that. Yeah, but it was funded by the National Institute of Health. So our own government. Um, let's see. TP Seeker wants to know, um, do I notice how many states are being forced to not give out numbers, especially retirement homes? Um, the numbers will come out in the end. You know, yes, I do believe that numbers are political. Look at some of my previous videos on the subject. Yes, it's become a thing where people are being forced to categorize deaths in different ways because there are bigger forces at play, you know, and so we're treating this differently than we've treated anything else. But in the end, we will see all of the excess deaths come as a wave, and I think that the truth will come out that way. Um, let's see. TP Seeker says every state is forced to do what they can to hide the numbers. even changing how to classify COVID deaths on certificates. Um, not every state, but many of them seem to be playing with the numbers a bit. And DeFranco's video goes on to talk about that. Jamie says SJWs hate Trump, uh, and therefore, I guess we are in league with everybody else who does. Um, this isn't an enemy of my enemy is my friend type deal. This pandemic is its own thing, and prior to this pandemic, I thought we were going to war with Iran. There was about a week and a half of that news, and then that just kind of, I guess, fell through. We're not doing that anymore because we're dealing with our own shit, and they're dealing with their own shit, and we were just kind of like, let's just call it a day, because we got bigger fish to fry, I guess. TP Seeker says, why would you give someone a drug for something if they don't have it? Well, there is precedent for that. There are the HIV negative partners of people who are HIV positive who are given dosages of drugs so that they don't catch it from their partner. That's just one example. But yeah, there are sometimes prophylactic doses given for certain reasons. I think I should make myself bigger in between these two boxes, like that big. You think? There we go. You need to see more of me when I'm talking about you. And Nick says, "Oh yeah, and also they would give it to you if you don't have it for profit." I can't disagree with that point, Nick. I mean, the fact that we have a for-profit healthcare system makes that very much something that I fear. Yeah, that's it for me today. Please click the link in the description box and read the study yourself, because Trump ain't gonna, and you really need to understand what's inside of it to understand how he's dismissing it without having read and understood it. Stay safe, everybody.